Hey friends, Justin here. Is it worth spending $150 on a cook kit for camping and backpacking when you can get one for $20? Today we're going to compare these two cook kits looking at the specs, features, performance, ease of use, and build quality to see why this one costs so much more and if there are differences, whether they're worth that extra cost. You can pick this budget cook kit up on Amazon. It comes with the pot, the stove, and the spoon. And I put this expensive one together with the Pocket Rocket Deluxe Stove by MSR, the Evernew Ultralight Titanium Pasta Pot size medium, and then this Toaks Titanium long-handled spoon. Looking at the specs, we start seeing some differences right away with the materials that they're made of and then the weights. With the budget cook kit, the spoon's made with stainless steel, the pot's made with aluminum, and then the stove here is made mostly with stainless steel as well. With the expensive cook kit, we're looking at some more high-end materials. The Evernew pot is made with titanium. The Pocket Rocket Deluxe Stove here is made with stainless steel, but it seems like it's a really high grade of material. And then the spoon here is also made of titanium. With the budget kit, the spoon weighs 25 grams, the stove weighs 90 grams, and then the pot weighs 230 grams. With the expensive kit, the spoon weighs 16 grams, the stove weighs 83, and then the pot weighs 116 grams. Once you add all of these weights up, the expensive kit weighs about 38% less than the budget kit. Quite a bit of weight savings, but most of that weight savings is coming with the pots. The expensive pot is made with titanium, where the budget pot is made with aluminum. And overall, you're gonna see a trend with backpacking cook kits. If it's made with titanium, it's probably going to be lighter and more expensive. The expensive spoon here is also quite a bit lighter than the budget spoon that's made with stainless steel, but overall the weight savings isn't that big. The big benefit for me with this titanium expensive spoon is it has a long handle, so I can really dig deep into my bags of food that I'm eating from, whereas this little short folding spoon, it folds, which is convenient for fitting in the pot, but it's not quite as long. But because there's not really that much of a difference with the spoons and what they bring to the table, we're actually going to set them aside and focus mostly on the stoves and pots as we talk about these next aspects of this comparison. Focusing on the features of the stoves first, you can see that they look kind of similar, but the first thing you're going to notice is that the Pocket Rocket Deluxe, the expensive stove here, has 3 arms on it, but these arms are nice and long and big. They provide a very large surface area for the pot to sit on, whereas we have 4 arms on the budget stove, which you might think would lead to it being a bit more stable, but because the arms are so short, it doesn't provide a great surface area, and they're actually a little bit flimsy as well. So with the arms, you are getting a better product with the expensive stove here, and if you're using a really big pot with a lot of water in it, then you're going to want that extra stability that the expensive stove provides. Both stoves also have piezo igniters. So on the Pocket Rocket Deluxe here, there's a little button here that you press, and then it sparks at the top here. So if you open up the fuel and then press it, it'll turn on the stove, which is really nice. You don't need to carry a lighter with you, even though it's good practice to have one just in case this fails. And then the other stove, the budget stove, also has a piezo igniter. So you can turn it on and then press that piezo igniter. But as you can see, it's not sparking right now. And that's because I find that the piezo igniter with the budget stove is just really unreliable. Some more differences that you'll see have to do with the burners. The first one being that the Pocket Rocket Deluxe has a much wider burner here compared to the budget option. You can see it's a much narrower burner, and the wider burner is going to make it so it's easier to cook. You're going to be less likely to burn your food if you are cooking within the pot because you're spreading that flame over a broader area as opposed to having it really concentrated like you do with the budget stove. Another feature that the expensive stove has is it has a lip around the burner, and that lip provides some wind protection so that if it is a windy day, you're going to get a pretty good flame going and you're gonna be able to cook pretty well still and not waste a whole ton of fuel. Whereas it kind of looks like there's a lip on the budget version here, but it doesn't extend up past the burner. So it's not gonna be working effectively to stop wind from impacting the flame. And for that reason, the expensive stove performs a lot better in the wind compared to the budget option, but we'll talk about performance a little bit and touch on wind because I did do some testing on how well these stoves performed under different conditions, including wind. The final difference in features is that the Pocket Rocket Deluxe has a regulator on it. So what that means is that it controls the gas coming from the canister through the stove and then out the burner. So this stove is designed to operate at a consistent low pressure, and that regulator helps keep it that way. whereas there's no regulator on the budget option here. Because of the regulator, the expensive stove is gonna perform better under cold conditions or at elevation anytime the pressure is really changing within this canister. Other than materials, there's not actually a ton of differences between the expensive and budget pots here. You can see the lid, there is a difference. So the lid on the expensive version has this strainer here. So if you are making something like pasta, then you can strain the pasta really easily, as well as the lid snaps on. So you can put it upside down, put it in your bag, and it's gonna stay on relatively easily compared to this loose top that you have on the budget version here. Something that's nice that they both have is that they have rubberized handles, so you can grab those, and if the pot's a little bit hot, it's not gonna transfer to your hands and burn you. You have that on the budget and the expensive versions. On the inside of both pots, you also have markers for the volume, so that's a really nice feature to have. Not something that you always see on budget options, but it makes it so that if you are pouring water and you need to have an exact amount for something like a freeze-dried meal, then you can hit that mark and you're not gonna have a really soggy meal or a really dry meal. Next, let's talk about ease of use. Both assemble really easily. So with the budget version here, you just extend the arms out and then these parts flip up, and then you can screw it onto the canister and it screws on nice and snugly and fairly easily. And then with the Pocket Rocket Deluxe, the arms fold down the side here and you can just fold them up. It's really simple. And then the valve for the gas is just right there, and then it also spins right onto a canister stove very easily as well. For performance, we're gonna talk about the pots first because there's only one real difference with performance between these two pots. Like I said, this one's titanium, this one's aluminum. Aluminum is going to allow you to cook within the pot a lot easier than titanium. It's super easy to burn food in titanium pots because it just transfers that heat really well, whereas the aluminum holds onto the heat, which makes it easier to cook and simmer food. So if you're gonna be cooking within the pot, get an aluminum pot. Doesn't have to be this budget option. GSI makes some really good ones as well. But if you're just boiling water, then a titanium pot is gonna be amazing for you. It's gonna boil that water quickly and it's gonna give you that lightweightness that you might want. For boil speed, I did some tests where I boiled 500 milliliters of water in the same pot for each of these stoves and timed how long it took, and the expensive stove just blew the other stove out of the water. It was quite a bit faster to boil water with this one compared to this one, and I'll post the times up in the corners there, as well as it was more efficient. It used less fuel to boil that 500 milliliters of water compared to the budget option. Once you introduce wind to the equation, which I did using a fan, and then I used an wind monitoring meter thingy to see that it was about 15 kilometers an hour, the expensive stove just pulls away even further from the budget option. It has that wind lip, so it performs just really well in the wind, and the times to boil 500 milliliters of water were not that much different with the wind with the expensive stove, whereas the time increased quite a bit with the budget stove here. When considering how well these two stoves performed at cold temperatures, you have to understand how the fuel in here works at cold temperatures as well. If you're using a good canister of fuel, you're gonna have mostly isobutane in there, which has a boiling temperature of minus 12 degrees Celsius. So if it's going below minus 12 degrees Celsius, then this is gonna the fuel in here is gonna turn into liquid, and you're gonna have a tough time getting it to come out of the stove and create a flame for you. Altitude, as well as how much fuel is in the canister, will affect that as well. So I'm using the stove in the mountains. I'm usually able to use a canister stove down to about minus 6 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or maybe just freezing if I am at even higher altitude and there's not a lot of fuel in my canister. But what's nice about the regulator on the expensive stove here is that you get consistent performance right to that temperature where the isobutane is turning into liquid and not providing you with gas. Whereas with the unregulated stove, you're gonna start seeing a drop off in performance quite a ways away from where that temperature is that the isobutane is turning into liquid. So if the isobutane is turning into liquid at minus 6 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you might start seeing a pretty big drop off in performance at freezing. Whereas the expensive stove is gonna continue to perform pretty well right down to that minus 6 degree temperature. As far as build quality goes, the pots are both pretty solid. I haven't had any problems with either of them, and they both work really well. For the stoves, it's a little bit of a different story. The expensive stove is just much more polished. It feels sturdier. It feels like it's more well put together. Whereas there's just a lot of weird moving parts and rattly parts with the budget stove here. It still works. I've used this a whole bunch and I haven't had problems with it, but it just feels like it's gonna fall apart a little bit sooner. I baby my gear, but if you're hard on your gear, then I would probably consider paying the extra money for the expensive stove because it's just gonna last you longer. If you like this comparison video, go check out a video post right up in the corner there where I compare a $300 down jacket to an $80 down jacket to see whether it's worth spending that extra money on the down jacket. And the results might surprise you.